We're recording. Thank you, Birgit. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, verstanden. Yeah, okay. Welcome to my lecture, and it is called Applied Cryopreservation. And John already told you who I am. In the beginning, I just have two tables with all the symbols and units that we might use so that you can look it up. If it's different from yours, you will find it here. So these two tables, and then a little bit background of the topics of my research group. If you are interested to come to Germany, the next student from my lab is going to come to your institution. We will have a discussion about what you could do in Minnesota. I have three groups. One group is called interfacial processes, where we have a focus on testing of new materials and medical implants. Here, for example, is a test device for heart valve prosthesis. Then we have a research group on biomaterials, where we develop different methods of how to produce and manufacture from polymers, for example. Here you see a heart valve prosthesis made by electrospinning. And we also do material testing. Here we have a vascular graft that we look at the property of kinking. And what we are talking about today is my research group on cryotechnology, where we want to develop safe and efficient cryopreservation protocols. We also like to develop new freezing and thawing equipment. I will not talk about thawing, unfortunately, because there is very less funding opportunities if you want to work on thawing, although it's so important. And of course, we monitor the preservation outcome after thawing, because if you wouldn't do this, there is no need in doing freezing. Okay, so these are the three groups, and if you're interested in, let me know. You will get my email address on my last slide. Okay, you already had some information, I think, about cryopreservation, and I always say we learn from nature what we can do. Ooh, how can we get this? Escape. I have two monitors. Hey, where is my escape? Oh, okay. Now this is my favorite, where we try to learn of. This is the Canadian frog, where I try to learn about freezing, although I was not allowed to have a frog in my freezer, although I would like to have it. Okay, so it doesn't run. So we learn from the snake, from the squirrel, from the butterfly, how they survive at sub-zero temperatures. Interesting was this finding not long ago in 2018. Russian biologists were able to bring these, what they called nematodes, back to life after 40,000 years in the Siberian permafrost. And two of them started to take their first meal since the last ice age. Yeah, so we can really learn from nature. And the question is, what can we learn? What kind of developments can we take from this? My question to the students is always, what does a car cooler and a fish from the Antarctic have in common? And yeah, the answer is antifreeze agents. For example, glycoproteins, ethylene glycol, and alcohol, and so on. So this is what we learned from nature. I'm a chemical and mechanical engineer. My thinking was that we engineers developed antifreeze. I didn't know from my studies that we learned it many years ago from nature. And we see it also here in the butterfly. And this is also very interesting because this butterfly prepares for the winter time because it reduces its water content and it produces in his own cells the antifreeze agent. In this case, it's glycerol, which was discovered by Polch in Great Britain. So this is what I meant. And I thought we engineers developed the antifreeze, but no, we found it from living organisms. So this was a little bit the starting. Another important feature for us engineers is water. Now, H2O sounds so simple, but water has so many difficult and strange properties. And since we and most of the organisms contain so much water, it's very important to learn about water. Here you see the swimming ice. So the anomaly in density, it has a very high surface energy, and so on. So prepare yourself in the properties of water in all three phases, also in the liquid phase, in the solid phase, but also in the gas phase. Okay, so cold shocks in nature. We heard about the antifreeze agent, glycerols, for example. They are synthesized in the organisms in flora and fauna, but now we are interested in human cells. So what is the problem? Maybe there's no problem. There are already companies in the world, for example, this Alcor company. They sell you to be frozen. Your blood is exchanged by antifreeze liquid, and then you are frozen. Yeah, I think these data are very old. I'm not sure about the prices today, but I found many years ago that such a burial or storage for your complete body would be 150,000 euros. If you only want to preserve your head, it's around 7,000 to 60,000 euros. Yeah. Now we can stop because you can see you can already buy it. Yeah. Maybe after all the lectures you get in this series, you are able to answer the question whether this is really possible. And if you really want it, if you are dead when you are frozen. I know actually about a German guy who was in all the newspapers last year who is preparing to be frozen after that. So he already signed everything and paid everything. Here we have a cold shock in the lab, so not in a company. Our wish is to have blood donations without any expiry date. So we want to freeze red blood cells, cryopreserve them. Here you can see it in my lab, but this is 15 years ago, where we had our red blood cells and they were frozen and punching them into the dewar in liquid nitrogen. Today, I think a robot would do this, what here my PhD student was doing. And what we know already is from the military blood bank of the Netherlands that frozen blood donations have already been used successfully in the United Nations Afghanistan military action some years ago. I'm not pretty sure about your country, but in Germany, it is not allowed at the moment to do so. So we have to work with the Red Cross and all the companies in the blood supply, whether they see the needs. And maybe you see the needs. I'm sorry that this is in German. It says, how many people do you know who gave blood, donated blood, during the last 6 months? Ask yourself. My answer is, I don't know anyone. So maybe there are not so many people doing this at the moment. I myself, I'm not allowed anymore to give blood, but I hope that as many of you as possible do this blood donation. In Germany, we need, and Germany is compared to your country very small. In Germany, we need 14,000 blood donations every day. And in end of October, we got these data that we do not have enough. And you also remember probably from school biology that we have different blood groups, and you see the groups here, A+, A-, and so on. And you see that we only have enough blood from B2 group, a B group, and AB and AB-, also AB+ and AB-. In all the other blood groups, we do not have enough blood at the moment, and we are in the COVID pandemic. I think it's really a problem. Yeah, I already showed you that my PhD student was doing the freezing, and just to show you, you are giving whole blood, but what we do freeze is here after centrifugation, the red blood cells. How do we do this? Yeah, you give your blood, the blood is in the bag, then it comes into the centrifuge. Then we do the centrifugation, and then we have the red blood cell concentrate and the plasma. And then in my country, it is just put here at 4 degrees centigrade in the liquid state. And after 40 days, you are not allowed to give it any longer to somebody. So we do not have enough blood. And then it may be, if it's the wrong blood group that is not needed so much, you even can't use it after 40 days. I think this is really not a good situation. If we would put it in the freezer and maybe store it at -40 degrees centigrade, we can store it for years. Here I must a little bit intervene, because all our measurements showed that we should not do the storage at -40 degrees centigrade, but we should go below -135 degrees centigrade, below the glass transition temperature of water. And then we can really use it for very, very long time periods. Yeah. Now, in the case of the blood donations, the geometry is already not so bad. It is a bag, more or less flat bag. And you all know how you get rid of the heat to cool it down. And you see that the surface is very important. So the bigger the surface in comparison to the volume, the better. And so this would be the same volume, but another surface area, which is much bigger. And with a bigger area, we can get rid of the heat faster. The cooling rate goes up. We need this antifreeze stuff, and we can use less of it if our cooling rate is high enough. So please, what my PhD student Tim Rittinghaus says, think out of the box, in this case, out of the bag. So what did he do during his PhD thesis? He found this nice patent of your country from 1902. And this is the so-called flow process for the preparation of window glass as a model. So he took this float freezer, he used perfluorocarbon, and then he made something similar than how to make glass for the freezing of other liquids. In this case, you see the red stuff here in the syringe. So he thought maybe we can use it for our red blood cell concentrate. And we do the cooling here with liquid nitrogen. So this was his PhD thesis from last year. He got his final PhD in this year. The perfluorocarbon is quite nice liquid because it is already applied in medicine in contact with blood. And here he, together with me, applied for a patent. And it's still pending, so we are waiting for the result. But since the patent has been asked for, I'm allowed to talk about it. So what did he do? He prepared a float freezer. Here we have again the syringe with the liquid. And here you see a view on the conveyor belt that he created to push the liquid red blood cell concentrate through this deep temperature. So he will put it in here. Here we have the belt. And you know, here you see it in action. You see the freezing. On the belt, the liquid that is frozen. And here the frozen, in this case, it was a saline solution when they took the video. But now here the red blood cell concentrate would be frozen in a continuous manner. And of course, at this point, we have again our bags where we would put it into the bags under sterile conditions, close the bag and transfer it directly into the liquid nitrogen storage container. This is the idea, and let's see whether we get the patent for doing so. You know, this is the temperatures that we use at the moment, which we were able to generate. The nitrogen was -40, perfluorocarbon was -25. This was, as I said, we started with the sodium chloride solution instead of blood. And the movement of the belt was 1.8 millimeters per minute. And the thickness of this frozen solution was 7 to 8 millimeters. And then he did the same with red blood cells from the pig. The concentrate has a much higher viscosity than the sodium chloride solution. So we had to increase the speed of the belt. The layer thickness again was 7 to 10 millimeters. And we achieved a cooling rate, which is still below 1 K per minute, which is not enough. So we have to work on that to increase this cooling temperature, freezing temperature. And you know that we have it in a solution, and the solution will shrink so that we here have our red blood cells at the end frozen. Okay, so this is what he did so far, and at the moment we are trying to get it changed to achieve higher freezing temperatures. Also freezing, excuse me, rates, freezing rates. Yeah, but we are very confident that this is possible. In the end, we could use this process not only for the freezing of red blood cells, but of course, all the cell suspensions, for example, stem cells that are donated also for special diseased people. We could use it in tissue engineering for polymers and for food. We could also use it for separation of mixtures according to the density. And we could also use it for directional freezing. I'm not sure whether you have heard about this process also. Okay, and this would be the point to go for another application, which is tissue engineering. I'm not sure how much you know already about tissue engineering. One workflow idea is to have the patient donates some cells. The cells are of course not enough, so we have to do the cultivation and expansion in order to have enough cells. Then we would need a scaffold which mimics the extracellular matrix, put in our cells, put it in a bioreactor for cultivation and give it back to the patient. I think this workflow is very, very time consuming and very, very expensive. There could be one point that maybe like with the blood, we can donate stem cells, which can be used for different people, different patients. And then, of course, we would need to do the cryopreservation of the stem cells. No, this would be similar to what I showed you for the red blood cells. We would think to do the freezing here, to do the cryopreservation of the ready-to-use tissue-engineered product. And here again, of course, we have to think about the parameters from the engineering point of view. You already know that you have to think about the cell type that we would need. And here you see the survival rate over the cooling rate. You probably know this picture. Just see that I didn't tell you anything wrong. The red blood cells really need most of the highest cooling or the freezing rates. And here are the stem cells. It's not such a problem. It's, I think, about 1 K per minute that we need to have for freezing of stem cells. And you know already if we do it wrong, if we do the freezing too fast, we get the intercellular ice formation. And if we do it too slow, dehydration is too fast, and then the cell would die because of toxic concentrations inside. So find a nice dehydration of your cell, which would be here, give the whole highest survival, try to find this cooling rate of the cells, and then try to use it in the tissue engineered construct. If you want to learn a little bit more about this cell shrinkage and the intracellular ice formation, go to the cryomicroscope, where you can visualize the cell damaging effects, which is quite nice. Okay, but then John said that we are trying to be near the application. Now, if we know the optimal freezing rate, maybe we also know about the optimal CPA and its concentration. If we do not do the freezing with the float freezer, we do buy a freezing device. And we normally call it controlled rate freezer. And here you see the controlled rate freezers which are on the market, and we have all of them in our lab. And here we have Mr. Frosty and another thing that is called cell so-and-so. This is not really controlled rate freezer, but funny enough, due to the special volume and size and the geometry, it creates a cooling rate of 1 K per minute. Now, there are these different types of freezers you could buy. Most of them, unfortunately, use your cells or your tissue engineered constructs and put them into this cylindrical tubes. Okay, now I told you, we know the cooling rate that we want to have. We know where the ice formation starts or should start. So we know about the nucleation temperature. And my PhD student asked himself, if I use such a broad device, do we really have these conditions? And so he made a nice study using all the controlled rate freezers in addition to Mr. Frosty. And he measured the sample temperature during freezing, the temperature of the chamber. You see here the temperature versus time, and so you get the freezing rate. We wanted to have 1 K, which is here, and the red, the black one shows the deviation of what is really 1 K per minute. Yeah. So, and here you see what we measured in the samples. There was here a deviation where we started with the nucleation. You get the latent heat. So it's very important, really, to measure whether what you program in your controlled rate freezer is really what you get in your sample. We got a lot of discussions when we first published this data on a conference, because I don't show you all the results that we got, but some of the companies' results were not so good, and they were really upset about these results. And they promised to improve their devices, and they really did. We got a new device from them, and the results were better. Okay. Yeah, and so in here you see what happens during freezing. So the manufacturer data versus the real measurements. And here it's not Mr. Frosty, here's the other one. It's called the cool cell. And you see the deviation. And here another result of the study is we measured the nucleation temperature. And here you see the nucleation temperature. This is the Ascion device. This is the asymptote device. So these are the companies. CM2000, the planner is well known. Mr. Frosty, I already mentioned. Cool cell, I already mentioned. And so you see the same sample, the same solution, the same volume, the same geometry. And this is what we find if we measure, for example, the transition from liquid to solid. So the nucleation temperature. My point is for you as engineers in industry later on, I don't want to talk about which company has the best device. For me, it's important that you measure the data and that you know what happens in your device. And then you can use whatever device. Okay, it's not only the temperature curve and the cooling rate that is different. It also depends on where you put your sample in the device. Yeah, here is Mr. Frosty, here is cool cell, because it's easy to show that you see if you go in the inner part, 5, 6, 7, or in the outer part, you get a temperature difference between 2 to 5 K. And in the cool cell, it's up to 2.5 K difference for these samples here in one diameter. And this is the asymptote, where we also put different samples. You see inside here, you see the cryo vials, and you see the thermal elements that we put in, and that we measured the temperatures. And here we had a difference from 2K, and in the planar also from 2K. So just depending on where the sample in the controlled rate freezer is put. Okay, so my summary here is the programmed cooling rate is not equivalent to the observed one. So you have to really measure it. You also have to measure the nucleation temperature. We did a lot of measurements. We know the optimal nucleation temperature for different cell types at different cooling rates. So if you know these data, please look whether your device gives you these data. And the temperatures are also dependent on the position in the freezing device. Okay, so we wanted to talk about tissue engineering. And one idea with tissue engineering is, first of all, put your cells in a hydrogel bead, because this gives some help for your cells during freezing. And if you do the cell seeding, here's the extracellular matrix, with the cell beads, you get a much more homogeneous cell distribution during tissue engineering. And this is just one story, story to show you. Here we have the beads made out of alginate. We do the freezing with 1K per minute. Ice formation here starts at minus 17.6 degrees centigrade, and then we do a fast thawing. This is without cells, as you can see here in the cryomicroscopic pictures. And we saw some damage of the beads depending on the nucleation temperature. So again, you see how important it is to know the nucleation temperature and to be able to control it. Now, here you see it's higher here, same chemistry, same size, everything same. And here you see a nice intact bead. And then we did the same with cells inside the bead. And you know that you can do the staining for live cells, then are red, green, the dead cells are red, and here we put them together. Here is the survival before freezing, 70%. And we, in the optimal case, we get 60% survival in our beads. And optimal was here 10% DMSO as CPA and this cooling rate. And here it's a higher cooling rate and lower DMSO. Here you see the loading time. And this is something that we also measured, because the loading is done by diffusion. So you also have to measure not only heat transfer, if you look at cryopreservation, you also have to look at mass transfer to get the cryoprotectant agent homogeneously into your 3D picture. And what we are doing now at the moment is actually in our beads, we already put the CPA. So now the CPA is direct to the cells we incorporate. Okay, so this is quite nice. And for the engineers, again, there are mechanical properties you have also to think of if you do the freezing of beads. Because of course, the mechanical properties change with temperature. And you use the frozen beads. So it's another point you have to think of if you want to go into the translation into the clinics. Yeah, and then of course you have to look whether the cell shapes and scaffold interactions remain nicely. And you measure the cell viability all the time. And you see these are quite nice pictures. Green cells, not many red cells you can see. Unfortunately, it's still 10% DMSO, and I don't know whether you had enough lectures about these agents. DMSO is unfortunately cell toxic at temperatures above 4 degrees centigrade, so to say. So you have to get rid of the DMSO after thawing. And this is again mass transfer. Okay, and so we did a second study with this tissue engineering constructs. Again, here we don't have the beads. Here we do put our cells directly into our extracellular matrix. And here we try to use different CPAs. And we try to work on let's say geometry. Okay, so we try to use here cryo bags and not what I showed you before with the freezing devices where we had to use these cryo vials. So this is another study. We make our extracellular matrix ourselves by electrospinning from polycaprolactone. Here we get these nice mats. They are highly porous. You cannot see it by eye, but they are porous. And then we put our cells on these scaffolds, and then we put them and we made them in a round thin shape. We used either DMSO or DMSO in sucrose, or ethylene glycol, or ethylene glycol and sucrose. We wait for 10 minutes for the diffusion. Then we did the freezing with 1 K per minute, up, down to -100. And then we put it into the freezer for storage at -140 centigrade. So this was above below the glass transition of water. Okay, then we did the thawing for 15 seconds, 37 degrees centigrade, and then we do the imaging to see what happens. And what we can tell you is we used the bag for the freezing or the multi-well plate. And we can say that with using the bag, similar to the blood bag for the red blood cells, viability was much higher than here. And this was a protocol that we found in literature from David Peck. And you can see here, we are happy that even without DMSO, we get quite high viability. So it's a nice project of my further PhD student, Sven Barker, who is now working on this different shape of freezing of tissue engineered constructs. Yeah, and here the story is improved heat transfer. We also start to modulate it, modulate it, and also, of course, work on the diffusion of the CPA to get into the cells. Okay, I hope I am in time. Maybe I talk too fast, but then you can ask questions now. I wanted to show you some examples, only some examples, what we do with the biobanking rare cell types. This was the stem cells, for example, or not rare, but the erythrocytes that we really need. Yeah, the blood banking. We use controlled rate freezers, but please try to find out whether you really get the freezing rate you want to have. We always try to use less DMSO. Also 10%, I think, is taken or used commonly, but we would like to reduce it. Take glycerol, sucrose. We used HES actually for blood before some medical people found out that HES, although it's a plasma expander, so it's given to patients if they have not enough liquid, also plasma, we should not use it. The red blood cell freezing. And yeah, you have to think about all these things with respect to the cell type that you are working on. Yeah, remember that your cell may die because of uncontrolled ice formation. You already learned this, and recrystallization upon thawing. Unfortunately, I told you I didn't show you studies on thawing because it's very difficult to get funding for thawing projects. But we developed thawing devices so that we can really guarantee at least a similar thawing rate in all the samples of the same cell type. Yeah, we also want to reduce the concentration of the DMSO. And for us, it's very important message if we do the cryopreservation of cells, tissues, and organs, that a very big problem is the unequal heat and mass transfer. So it's very important to look at geometry and volume to really guarantee that every cell in the volume gets the same temperature change and has the same temperature as the neighbors. Okay, and with this, I would like to finish my short lecture today. Here is my email address if you want to contact me, if you want to come to our lab and to see some of these things in real. We can also offer some videos that we took in our labs if you want to see more about the equipment.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Birgit. So we have a couple minutes for questions. We have actually less than 5 minutes, but I just want to emphasize that a lot of what you saw in Birgit's lecture is focused on slow freezing, that 1 K per minute. That is in the presence of ice. So a lot of what we've been talking about, or we'll continue to talk about, is actually another approach called vitrification, where we try to actually avoid ice. So just be aware that there are these two different ways of doing things. Questions?
Yeah, with the red blood cells, we like to go more to the very fast freezing.
Oh, here's next. Okay.
Sure. Hi, Professor. I'm interested in that study that you did comparing devices, the nucleation that's very different between devices. I would expect the nucleation to mainly depend on what's going on inside the vial, the texture, the inside of the vial, the presence of a thermocouple, nucleators in the sample. So I'm asking, the question is, could you speculate what is going on? What is the physical mechanism that creates all these differences between devices?
No, I think between because the samples and the thermocouples and everything was the same. So yeah. It's really the temperature distribution in your room.
Okay, so maybe I don't know, parts of the device touching the vials and causing cold spots, or what?
Yeah, okay, this is in Mr. Frosty, yeah, of course, and in Cool Cell, yeah. Also we did not try to find out why. For us, it's important that the users know what they have.
Okay.
Also we are not giving advices of that they should improve or what right. They should improve. This was not our intention.
Okay, thank you very much.
It was just to say, see what you have. And also Mr. Frosty, and so I was always really shocked about the system. But 1K per minute in the little vials in the special volume you get.
Great. Thank you, Professor.
Maybe a last question for Birgit. Anybody have a quick one? Maybe I have one quick one. This is really great. I really enjoyed seeing the battery of devices that you have. You're saying that you're interested in moving towards faster freezing. Can you outline what you're doing in that area, or are you doing anything in the area of vitrification?
Naja, Tim is trying to improve the float freezer. Ne? As soon as we have a thinner liquid flowing there and going to deeper temperatures, which is not the problem. We can use liquid nitrogen. The problem is the belt material.
Okay. So that could be a high throughput vitrification device.
Yeah, but the belt material is a problem because we don't have materials that may withstand so deep temperatures.
Yeah, and that original.
Then we need the liquid with the perfluorocarbon.
Got it. Yeah, and that original patent was actually on glass formation, right? Of action.
Yeah.
So that's very nice. Great. Well, let's thank Birgit once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you spending some time with us, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye, Birgit. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Genau. Hope to see some of your students in Germany.
Deutschland. Okay. Guten Abend in Deutschland. Okay. Tschüss. Tschüss, Birgit.
Okay, bye-bye.